Hi everybody, welcome to another Opinionated Science Educator video. This video is for support of grade 10 learners in life sciences. I'll be answering questions that I found on the Facebook page, the Life Science Study Group. As promised, I'm answering questions that I found on the Life Science Study Group, a public group that you can find on Facebook. The following questions were asked by the same user. What is the function of sclerenchyma and what is the function of collenchyma? Now, firstly, before I answer these questions, I want to point out a few things. You learn by actively engaging with what you have to know. As Confucius said, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. So things you can do. Read actively through your textbook chapter and make notes. Make summaries by annotating diagrams of the different tissues, include labels with annotations about structure and function, and construct tables to compare the different tissues and their relationships. So let's just remember that we're dealing with a plant that has both a root and shoot system. Now, plants are multicellular. They have tissues made up of various types of cells, and those tissues are either meristematic or the non-meristematic or permanent tissues. Now, there are three types of permanent tissues: the dermal tissue, the ground tissue, and the vascular tissue. Collenchyma and sclerenchyma are examples of ground tissue, and let's just focus in on where that tissue would be found. For example, we're going to be looking at the tissue that is found in the leaf, because the leaf would need support from both types of tissues, as I will explain. So let's now look at the tissues separately. Now, this is taken from Biology Online and it deals with plant tissues. As with all areas of biology, the organs are comprised of tissues that work together for a common function. And in biology, a big idea is that structure is related to function. So in this tutorial, let's go to firstly the collenchyma tissues, and then we'll look at the sclerenchyma tissue. So collenchyma tissue, like parenchyma, stays alive for a long time. The main difference is that it has increased thickness in their walls, and in cross-section the walls look uneven. So as the plant grows, these cells allow flexible support of the organs. Now, sclerenchyma tissue also has thick cell walls, but they're secondary cell walls that are laid down. Lignin is laid down inside. And as the sclerenchyma matures, the cell dies. So there are two main forms of sclerenchyma. There are sclerids, which are randomly distributed throughout the plant, and they are found in specific zones. For example, when you eat a pear, that grittiness comes from the sclerids. So they give that support and strength. Fibers, on the other hand, are always found in association with a variety of tissues in the roots, stems, and leaves to give the plant the rigidity that it needs. Okay, so that is an overview of the two types of tissues the question was asked about. Now I want to look specifically at the difference between the tissues, because this will be helpful in understanding what their function is. So the key difference between collenchyma and sclerenchyma is that the collenchyma has irregularly thickened primary cell walls, while the sclerenchyma is a type of dead plant cell that has heavily thickened secondary walls. So the secondary walls are laid inside the primary wall. Sclerenchyma is a dead cell, collenchyma is a living cell. So that is the main difference. So now let's look at collenchyma in more detail. Okay, collenchyma looks very much like parenchyma, but one way to tell it apart is that it, firstly, its wall has a lot of pectins in it, and that's what gives it elasticity, but it is thickened at the corners. So zooming in on that picture, you can see that is a living cell, just thickened corners. So they're always living cells. They often have elongated cells, and there are secondary deposits of cellulose in the cell walls. These usually occur in the peripheral regions, such as the corners and so on. So these cells are plastic and elastic, and they combine to give the plant this tensile strength and flexibility needed for blowing in the wind, for example. Okay, so it allows the plant to stretch and grow and transfer solutes to the walls and so on. Okay, so collenchyma gave support by having those thickened cell walls, but what about sclerenchyma? Sclerenchyma is mainly dead cells, and it supports the plant and gives rigidity to the plant so it's not blown over. Okay, in this ground tissue, this gives the support to the plant, and the sclerenchyma ceases cell enlargement, so it stops growing. Then lignin gets laid down inside the primary cell wall, and that's when the secondary thickening occurs. So sclerenchyma cells generally have thickened secondary cell walls that contain cellulose and lignin. So they don't have any cytoplasm or nucleus. They eventually become dead and hard, and therefore when you stain them, that's why they often appear red. But those are sclerenchyma cells there in the middle. So again, just remember, they don't have cytoplasm and they don't have a nucleus. I want to just, and yes, when they eventually they become dead and hard, and it gives the plant the rigidity it needs so it's not blown over by the wind or doesn't break. So scanning in on those, you can see that empty part which is called the lumen. Okay, there's no cytoplasm, there's no nucleus in there, so that it's a dead tissue and it gives the plant strength. Okay, so sclerenchyma gives it support because of the lignin. Now, sclerenchyma supports the plants. It occurs as bundles or fibers. Now, remember, there are two types of sclerenchyma, sclerids and fibers. Now, I just want to point out that the fibers are highly elongated and they overlap each other, and that's what gives the plant its rigidity. So they occur in bundles or groups. So now I want to compare the two in terms of structure and function. Firstly, they are both plant cells, so they have cellulose cell walls. Both types of cells support the plant mechanically. So in other words, they give it some type of support, and both of their cell walls will contain cellulose. So those are how they are similar. Both are plant cells, both give support, and both have cellulose in their cell walls. But what are the differences? What are the key differences between Collenchyma and Sclerenchyma in terms of structure and function? So Collenchyma has elongated plant cells that have irregularly thickened primary cell walls. But Sclerenchyma cells are dead plant cells that have thickened secondary cell walls. Okay, so it's the secondary cell walls that are thickened. So in terms of the functional difference, okay, Collenchyma gives the plant the mechanical support and elasticity that it needs, for example, to bend in the wind and so on. Okay, but Sclerenchyma provides that mechanical support and rigidity that plants need so that they're not just blown over by any strong wind. Both give support, but because of the primary cell walls being thickened and Collenchyma being a living cell, it gives support and elasticity. But Sclerenchyma, because it's a dead cell with thickened secondary cell walls, it then gives the mechanical support and rigidity that plants need. So because of this secondary thickening, Sclerenchyma cells are dead cells and they don't have any chloroplasts. Okay, now let's put this in table form. Collenchyma cells are types of ground tissue that have irregularly thickened primary cell walls. Sclerenchyma have heavily thickened secondary walls. Collenchyma is a living cell, Sclerenchyma is a dead cell. At maturity, Collenchyma is therefore alive, but Sclerenchyma is not. In terms of function, Collenchyma provides the mechanical support and elasticity plant organs need, whereas Sclerenchyma provides the rigidity and support that they need. Cell walls, Collenchyma only has thickened primary cell walls. Sclerenchyma has thickened secondary cell walls. The cell wall in Collenchyma is made of cellulose and pectin. In Sclerenchyma, it's cellulose and lignin. Collenchyma is a living cell, so it has cytoplasm and a nucleus, and it has chlorophylls or chloroplasts and can photosynthesize. But Sclerenchyma tissue is a dead cell, no cytoplasm, no nucleus, and it does not have a chlorophyll. So it does not have chlorophylls or chlorophyll. So that is how the two types of support tissue differ. The one is to give support and elasticity and therefore needs to be a living tissue. The other is for the rigidity and the thickened secondary cell walls mean that the cell contents dies and it forms these rigid bundles. I hope that you found that response useful to the two questions. So until next time, this is the Opinionated Science Educator saying goodbye.